Chapter 1055 just dropped and everyone is ready to ride the huge train Oda has set for us in the final saga. But like always, in an intense and fairly packed chapter, there's a lot of details you could miss in just one or two reads. So here's everything you missed in chapter 1055. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for a free piece of meat. Number 1. God Haki. Obviously, a huge part of the chapter was Shanks coming and absolutely destroying Green Bull. So much so that he made Green Bull look like he's gonna start praying to Shanks. But what's very interesting about this move by Shanks is that he was able to direct the Conqueror's Haki from so far away, and it gave us many new things to look at when dealing with Conqueror's Haki. We have the change of weather and the gusts of wind created from Shanks' attack. We now know that Conqueror's Haki can paralyze opponents at will, and can also be used to communicate as well. Now, we could go on to a tangent with the idea that Conqueror's Haki and the Voice of All Things have some similarities, but with what Shanks has shown us in this chapter, there's going to be a lot more to expect and possibly achieve with Conqueror's Haki in the future. Number 2. Green Bull's major PTSD. Green Bull shows a rather interesting counter when going up against Raizo's fire release, but it raises a very interesting question since Green Bull already seems quite agitated with the events of the outside world. Connecting some dots, it could be possible that Sabo was really effective against Green Bull, and maybe even awakened his devil fruit. I mean, fire does seem to be a touchy subject for Green Bull right now, and who knows, this loser might be just projecting since he just took a fat L recently and now wants to boast about his counter to fire against a much weaker opponent in Raizo. But with Green Bull acting like a complete idiot in this chapter, it gives high hopes that Sabo has definitely become much stronger. Number 3. The return of Oden. Now, this is a much more minor detail, but it's still a very nice one as it's a great way to wrap up things in Wano. We see Luffy on the edge of the flower capital with Sanji, Jinbei, and Zoro. Now, although Luffy is purely spectating the fight and sees how Momo doesn't need any help, Oda adds a very subtle detail, but it makes the panel so much better. In the panel, we see Luffy actually eating Oden, the food. It's many details like this that Oda puts in the chapter to make it much better, and if you notice, it adds much more of an emotional callback as well. Nice touch, Oda. Number 4. Momo's insane power. Momonosuke has started to tap into his true powers, and it makes us truly question, how is his fruit considered a failure? In this chapter, he's now able to replicate the Boro Breath, one of Kaido's strongest and most formidable moves. But the one thing we need to pay attention to that actually makes a lot of sense is Momo's emotions. Just like in Punk Hazard, where Momo actually became a dragon after a huge wave of emotions, we see a similar effect in this chapter as well. But instead of becoming a dragon, it's using the dragon abilities. Even in this chapter, Momo fails to use the Boro Breath at first, but after becoming much angrier with Green Bull, his emotions start to kick in, which results in Momo actually being able to use the Boro Breath. So in the future, we should pay attention to Momo's more emotional moments, as they might bring us more crucial and strengthening moments for this failure of a devil fruit. Number 5. The truth of Wano. Now, moving on to more of the lore focus in this chapter, we see a huge emphasis on how Wano used to be at sea level 800 years ago, and how it changed over time. One thing to note is how there weren't any cliffs before Wano's existence, but with time passing by, the cliffs in Wano appeared to close off the country, and rainwater started to flood the original island of Wano. Now, the main question to ask is, are the cliffs and the rainwater in Wano man-made? There's many pieces of evidence even in this chapter alone that point to these two things being the result of a person's actions rather than nature itself. We could even dive in and talk about a possible water-based devil fruit, since the water that has flooded old Wano is not even seawater, as Robin pointed out that seawater wouldn't have kept the structures underwater well preserved. As for the cliffs surrounding Wano, we know that the cliffs must be taken out in order for Pluton to be used, and we also know that Zunisha can do this himself. We'll just have to wait and see what Momo will do, as he'll ultimately make the decision to open Wano, thus opening the way for Pluton to be used as well. Number 6. Devil fruits underwater. One thing that we definitely have to talk about is how Jack was able to get the road poneglyph in Wano. Keep in mind, Jack is a fisherman who also ate a devil fruit, so if he goes into water, he basically just sinks down to the ocean floor and pretty much just stays there. But he can breathe the whole time, so this whole situation is kind of peculiar and a first, even in the One Piece world. But the question is, how did he he move underwater? Well, there are many options, like the technology Kaido could have created with Queen from the weapons factory, or Jack could have gotten to the location of the poneglyph before he even ate a devil fruit, which is why Kaido trusts him so much. So there's many options for how Jack got the world poneglyph, but we'll just have to wait and see what Oda comes up with. Number 7, Uta is canon. While going through the madness that is Shanks' Conqueror's Haki, we see Shanks have a quick flashback of the new age he was talking about, and we see 3 distinct characters: Luffy, Momo, and Hiyori. But if you look to the left a little bit more, we see a child which is shadowed, but with the amount of children or young generation Shanks has an attachment to, one can only assume that this 4th child has to be Uta. And if Oda is adding it into the actual manga and not just the cover story, it makes Uta an actual canon character. Number 8, is Raizo dead? Now, with a Navy Admiral coming into Wano and Momo being able to fend him off for a little bit, I'm sure that there are going to be some consequences for this specific battle. And with that being said, we see Raizo being drained just like King and Queen, and with chapter 1056 most likely being like an aftermath of said battle, we'll be able to see the long-term effects of what happened to Raizo. Is he dead, or is he just heavily injured and in like a week he'll be fine? Quick shade to Zoro and Luffy. Number 9, the new guardian deity of Wano. Now, with the discussion of Yamato joining the crew and Momo essentially forcing Yamato to be with Luffy, since Momo doesn't want Yamato joining the battle with Green Bull, we have to understand how Luffy would respond. Momo talks about being able to protect Wano without Luffy, but what if there's a situation for Yamato to be the guardian deity of Wano and for Luffy to have Yamato as a new crew member? Well, the answer is simple, and that's to have Luffy declare Wano as his second territory. Obviously, Luffy won't just let anyone come back and try to invade Wano. He seems to already be in a more passive role in this chapter, but I could easily see Luffy stamping his name on Wano to not only solidify its defense, but to also make Momo's job of protecting Wano much easier. I mean, he's still an 8-year-old mentally, you gotta remember that. Number 10, the massive irony of Green Bull. Yeah, it's honestly quite hilarious when you realize it, but this is yet another massive L taken by Green Bull. After 20 years of tyrannical rule by Kaido and Orochi, Wano looks like a desolate wasteland. And although there's been a huge amount of joy after the defeat of these awful rulers, it would take a very long time for Wano to rebuild itself, maybe even another 20 years. But lo and behold, the most ironic twist ever, Green Bull starts to help the regrowth of Wano itself. It's even funnier when you see him talk extremely harshly about Wano and how it doesn't deserve any rights since it's a country not affiliated with the world government, but then proceeds to help said country. At this point, Green Bull is just a lost cause. Number 11, Big Mom is still alive. Now, in a very positive chapter, I'm sure bad news isn't too great, but with one panel of the party in the Flower Capital, we can confirm that Big Mom is still alive. At the very beginning of the chapter, we see Nami hanging out with Tama and Zeus. Now, obviously, we know that Zeus's soul is linked to Big Mom, which means that if Zeus is alive, so is Big Mom. But the real question is, when will Big Mom get up? And how will she get out of the huge pit of magma underneath Wano? Now, with all that being said, expect more of these heat-filled chapters soon, as there's no break next week. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe, as we are on the road to 1,000 subs. Hope you guys have an amazing day, and as always, take care.